So I remember to do that and that I don't have to interrupt
I'll be
you.
right back. Just a second.
Great. Okay. So it is 3:01. So yeah, let people in and we'll figure that out. Hello, everyone. Welcome. So glad you're all here. Good to see faces, familiar and unfamiliar. We invite you to turn on your camera no matter what state you're in. If this is your lunch break, your snack break, if you're up on your exercise bike, whatever you need to do. We're so grateful that you're here, and we would love for you to introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like to share where you are zooming in from today. And then either what brought you to this class or what you are bringing into this class. What are you bringing with you today? We would love for you. Yes, New Rochelle. It's always fun to see geographically where we are represented today. Beautiful. Hello, Michelle. Shalom, Laura and Mark. In Wales. Mark, you're in Wales. Officially, I think, the first person to Zoom, I think, on anything that I've ever done, except maybe for Limud that one time. From Wales, welcome. We've got Iowa, yes. Hi, Damien, so glad that you're back. Right, Columbia, Miami, hello. Miss Eve and Ellen, wonderful. So grateful that you're all here, and grateful also if you're watching this on Facebook, where we are streaming this into the group Welcome to the Light Lab, which you're welcome to join. Or if you're watching this in the replay, we're so glad that you're here. I wanted to take a couple of moments before we started to introduce myself and introduce the series, because we have a lot of wonderful new faces who have joined us. So my name, as it says below, is Eliana Light. Yes, that is my real name. And I am the founder and the head philosopher of the Light Lab. Yes, that is a title that I gave myself. Because why not give yourself a wonderful title if you can? Our mission at the Light Lab is to make Jewish liturgy and prayer practice accessible and meaningful to all seekers. And I bet that you are here in this class in particular because you are seeking to learn more about liturgy and prayer and to study it more deeply. So we're so glad that you are here. Through heart-centered, embodied, inviting methodology, we unlock the transformative power of tefillah to strengthen our spiritual cores and revitalize our communities. And we're working towards a future, our vision, where tefillah inspires, comforts, and empowers us towards oneness and a healing world. So this will hopefully go towards that. And I invite you to send yourself some gratitude for being here on this lovely Wednesday afternoon. And then, as I like to say, if you can look at another little box on your screen and send someone a smile, maybe a wave, hello. So glad that you're here. Love all the smiles in our boxes. And then, even though we're going to be studying liturgy today, it is in fact Torah as well. So let's raise up this moment with a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. We experience the blessing of the Holy One in this moment through getting busy with words of Torah. I'm now going to pass it on to our esteemed teacher and lecturer, as some of you know, my teacher from my first semester ever at Brandeis, who inspired me to really keep exploring liturgy and prayer up until this very day. Foremost liturgist of our time, Rabbi Professor Reuven Kimelman. Shalom, Rabbi. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Eliana, for that extraordinary introduction. I hope it has a prayer. Okay, we are now, this is our second session in the study of the 3 paragraphs of the Shema, the Parshiyot. We went through the first Parashah, V'ahavta, last time, with a colorful introduction. And today we're going to focus upon the second Parashah, Vaya im Shemoah. I do not think there's any Parashah in the Siddur more misunderstood than the second Parashah of the Shema. Ever since the time of Barsad Gaon, followed by Yehuda Levi, and followed by the Ramban, it has been argued that the second paragraph of the Shema deals with schar va'onish, reward and punishment. This is a very difficult and strange way of taking the second parashah. First, that understanding is not found in Chazal. Two, the terms schar va'onish, reward and punishment, are not found in the parashah. Three, it simplifies a very complex paragraph excessively. So we're going to argue that this is not only not the proper understanding, it's also a misunderstanding. And is this misunderstanding of the parashah, that it deals with schar va'onish only, has led the Reform movement to exclude this part of the Shema from the Siddur. The Mishkan Tefillah, which is a beautiful piece of work on the liturgy by the Reform movement, by virtue of this understanding, has decided to exclude it. Argument does not conform to theology or the world as they perceive it. So let's look at it from the very
Well, seems that we have lost our teacher for a moment. As happens, just as it was getting good. Stop the share for a moment, come back together. As this happens, we have so many people here from all over the world. Welcome. Maybe it's just too much liturgical goodness. It's overwhelming the system. Let's see. Okay, perhaps Rabbi Kimelman will leave. In the meantime, what are your initial impressions when you come across the second paragraph of the Shema, either to study or in your liturgy? Is it even part of the liturgy as you know it to be? What kind of preconceived notions are we coming into this about that paragraph? Because I certainly have a few. We will name some things in the chat as we problem solve, as we are wont to do. What preconceived notions are you coming in with for this paragraph in the Shema? Right. He's saying it's not about reward and punishment, and yet that is how I have read it. Certainly I'm in that camp as well. Let's see. I'm going to reshare the Zoom link. My way or the highway? Not even the highway. My way or no way. My way or no way. What else do we see there? Humans plan. Come back in when you can. I'd sing you a melody from this piece of the liturgy, but I don't have one. If anybody knows a melody besides trope for the second paragraph of the Shema, let me know. Ooh, actions have consequences. Oh, right. The part of whispering the curses. It's not recited aloud. Oh, Rabbi. Sympathetic magic. Very cool. I know some folks who read it these days as not an allegory, but even to say the way we treat the earth produces its own consequences within the earth. Welcoming Rabbi Kimelman back into the Zoom. Don't they say humans plan? And now we're making you co-host, Rabbi Kimelman, so you can unmute and join us again. We'll make sure it's working. Hello.
Okay, are we back together?
We're back. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. The computer went on the blink.
It happens.
Okay. So we're back to Vayayim Shema. So the question we're going to do today is we're going to make a literary analysis of Vayayim Shema by asking the question, how does it mean what it means? Which means before you can make a conclusion on the meaning of a parashah, one has to go through every word carefully and see its connections. Then the question is, how does it relate to the first paragraph of the Shema? How are they connected? Why are they put together? Even though they're quite separate in the book of Devarim, they've been juxtaposed in the Siddur. Was this part of the original intention? Or is it a later liturgical construction? What we call midrash. By midrash, I mean, we take two parts of the Tanakh, which are distinct parts, and by juxtaposing them, we create a linkage which is not biblical, but creates a new meaning. So we're going to look at that, and then we'll come to conclusions of the differences, the commonalities, and what the implications of them are. So what I'm going to do is divide Vayayim Shema into 4 parts. So I'm going to begin. It says in lines 13 to 15, describe the hypothetical. 16 to 17 verses describe or present the potential negative result and penalty. 18 to 20 lay out the antidote to the waywardness engendered by satiety. We're seeing that satiety and affluence is the major problem here. And we follow presents the positive result and reward. Now, there is a reward at the end. The question is there a punishment at the beginning? And do the phrase schar va'onish, reward and punishment, are they sufficiently adequate to cover the whole of the data? And if they're not, that means they're insufficient. Or are they actually misleading? And that's not the real nature of the paragraph. So look at the way I'm going to translate. I'm going to begin the opening line, Vayayim Shema, not as most people do with an if, because if there's an if, it should be followed by a then. But if you'll notice in all the opening lines, there is no word then, which would be uz or something like that. There are only lines which begin with the letter vav. If you look at the different translations in the Siddur, or translations of Sefer Devarim, different translators choose different verses to translate as then. Which vav is the then? So the argument is, if then is not really clear, then maybe if is not really clear, and then we don't have a really if and then. If we do have an if and then the if is normally perceived to be negative, and the then is the purported punishment. But let's try this translation and see if it makes more sense of the data. So Vayayim Shema, I'm translating, were you to heed my commandments, a subjective, that I enjoin upon you this day, loving the Lord your God, serving him with all your lave and nefesh. I'm not translating the phrase lave and nefesh, because in the first session, we spent a good portion focusing upon the multiple meanings of lave and nefesh, arguing that the lave in biblical Hebrew has a range of meanings from feeling to understanding, and nefesh has a range of meanings from body to soul. But here I'm going to assume that whatever it means in the first paragraph of the Shema, that meaning is retained in the second, since I have no indication of change in meaning. And we'll find out that its implication is significant for the meaning of this paragraph as we go on. Then it goes on. And were I to provide rain for your land in season, early rain and the late, the two terms, and you gather in your new grain and wine and oil. And were I also to provide grass in the fields for your cattle, so they eat to satiety. This is called svia, like achalta v'savata. Now, what would happen? Were I to do all this, what would happen? So the problematic is the result of line 15. Line 15 is worried, what would happen if I gave you everything you needed? Grass in your fields for your cattle, and you could eat plenty. The result would be the following. Take heed not to be lured away to serve other gods and bow down to them. Now, why would you do that? Because in ancient Canaan, the god of rain was called Baal. Those who know the story of Eliyahu, a majority of the people worshipped Baal. Now, according to Eliyahu, it's not that they did not worship the God of Israel, it's that they were poseach al shtei sipim. They wanted to have their cake and eat it too. So, antiquity, very few people believed in only one God. That would like putting all your investments and not diversifying. Diversification is the best sense of safety. So why would you put all your investments in a single God? There are multiple gods. Let's go for them all. Moreover, Baal is the storm god. So if anybody brings rain in Canaan, which is dependent upon rain and frequently suffers from drought, who gets the credit? Baal. So God says, I have the following dilemma. Were I to provide everything you need, and the rain comes in the season, who will you give credit to? You'll give credit to Baal. Therefore, it says specifically, take heed not to be lured away to serve other gods and bow to them. Why would you bow to them? Precisely because you have the rain. And it says, were I to provide grass in the fields for your cattle, you eat to satiety. And ancient Canaanite religion gave credit for these to Baal. And you'll do that. What will happen? Otherwise, get it? Adonai's anger will flare up against you. He will shut up the skies, so there'll be no rain on the ground, will not yield its produce, and you will soon be lost from the good land that Adonai is giving to you. Now watch the words very closely. Why will I stop the rain? I'm stopping the rain not to punish you. I'm stopping the rain because when the rain comes, you give credit to Baal. So there's a direct connection between agricultural abundance, rain in its season, and being lured away to serve other gods and bow to them. And when you bow to other gods, get it? That is what causes divine anger. So what does God do? He removes the problem. The problem is the rain. And if you attribute the rain to other gods, then what will God do? Simply withhold the rain. But there's not a punishment here, because the last line says, and you will soon be lost from the good land. It does not say that God will expel you from the land. That says it other places. Here it simply says, when there is no rain, you cannot work the land. When you cannot work the land, what will happen? People will emigrate from the land. We have a story like this in the book of Ruth. There was drought in the land, and Avimelech and Naomi went to where? To the land of Moab. They did not go there because they abandoned God. They did not go there because they were being punished by God. They simply went there because there was a drought. The land was not productive. So you move to a place where it is. So it doesn't use any verb here of destruction. It just simply says, you'll be lost, abadatem, from the land that Adonai is giving to you. And the simple reason is why? You will emigrate. So now the question is, what do you do? That is, how can God both provide rain and maintain loyalty? According to the original conditions, they are either or. If I provide the rain, you ascribe it to the God of rain. And if I don't provide the rain, you will leave the land. It's a catch-22. So what does he do? It says, rather you shall place these words of mine on your lave and on your nephesh. Those are the same words we had in the Shema. In the Shema, they relate to the tefillin. So he says, what will happen? I want you to put it on your lave and on your nephesh by binding as a sign on your hand and letting them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Now in the Shema, we saw that tefillin engaging one's physical power on the arm, one's emotional power turned toward the heart, and one's intellectual power being on the head, or visual power before the eyes. In any case, I'm going to bind you to me. Now, how do I bind you to me? By also having you teaching your children. And we explained before, b'chol nafshecha, while nefesh means as a range of meanings from body to soul, therefore nefesh exhausts who you are. By saying b'chol nafshecha, I have to add something which is like you, but not identical to you. That which contains your nefesh and your leiv, but is not you, are your children, as a vishinantam levanecha. This is deduced from the phrase b'chol. Whenever we have the word b'chol, the Talmud says ba'al rabot. It comes to include something I would otherwise leave out. So in that paragraph, when it's talking about the love of God, if one really testifies to the love of God, one engages one's children's for the simple reason, what one loves, one wants one's children to love it. So b'chol nafshecha, to love God with all your nefesh, means your leiv and your nefesh, and more than that, with not identical to it. That is your children. Here, what do? You teach them to your children and talk about them when you're at home, when you are away, when you lie down, and when you get up. Now, this line is a direct quotation of the line of the Shema. It even keeps to the singular, even though this paragraph switches from plural to singular, singular to plural. So the Shema paragraph is all in the singular. Therefore, the phrase or the morphological suffix lecha, singular to the plural. In this specific case, we keep to the singular, even though in context we would demand the plural, because the second paragraph is indicating I'm quoting from the first paragraph. In order to indicate a citation, I use the exact same morphological suffix. And then what do? I inscribe them on the doorposts of your house. So we have three elements here. We have here the first is an indication of tefillin, that is in line 18. Then in line 19, we have the issue of Talmud Torah, teaching. And then in line 20, we talked about the mezuzah. Now, anybody who reads this should become aware that it reverses the order of the first paragraph of the Shema. Here, what comes first is line 18 is tefillin. Then what comes next? Talmud Torah, line 19. Then what comes next? Mezuzah. Now, if you look at the Shema, the order is reversed. The mezuzah remains the last one, but the topic of 18 and 19 get reversed. So now the question is, why does tefillin come first here and Talmud Torah come second? So bear that in mind when we compare the two paragraphs. Then we conclude the Shema with the reward. What's the reward? So that your days and the days of your children may multiply in the land that Adonai swore to your ancestors to give them as long as the sky endures over the earth. In other words, the reward is being maintained in the land. Not only will you remain in the land, but your children shall remain in the land, because your children are now involved in the three things of tefillin, Talmud Torah, and mezuzah that you were involved in. So the goal of the paragraph is to keep Israel in its land. But in order for Israel to keep in its land, it must be prosperous. The problem with becoming prosperous is prosperity is due to rain. The problem with rain is attributed to the God of rain. Therefore, as soon as you get rain and you live in a life of plenty, you'll be led astray and follow them. And this is the problem which affects Deuteronomy over and over again. So now we're going to page 2 and find the other sources in Deuteronomy where this is a problem. Okay, so look at the top of the paragraph here. It says, Deuteronomy highlights the linkage between satiety and the abandonment of God by repeating in 3 different places that eating one's fill can lead to forgetting God. The first 2 also use the term take heed, hishamru lachem, and contain the expression eat to your fill, achalta v'savata. The first begins immediately following section 1. I'm now going to read the next 3 paragraphs, and you'll see that the Deuteronomy is bothered by the problem of how do I provide prosperity without prosperity leading to defection. In Deuteronomy, the major source of defection from God is not poverty, it is affluence. Affluence causes defection. Look what it says in chapter 6 of Deuteronomy, verses 10 to 12 and 15. There it says, when Adonai your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, Abram, Isaac, and Jacob, to assign to you great and flourishing cities, that you did not build houses full of good things, and you did not fill hewn cisterns that you did not hew, vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant, and you eat your fill. Take heed, right? Achalta v'savata, same expression over. Hishamru lachem, what? That you do not forget Adonai, who freed you from the land of Egypt, lest your Lord grow angry with you and wipe you off the face of the land. Now follow it. Here, it says specifically that it's a direct punishment, but the problematic is the same. What's the problematic? That affluence leads to the forgetting of God who brought us out of Egypt. And the result is God will grow angry and wipe you off the face of the land, which is not exactly what it says in our paragraph. In our paragraph, drought will cause you to lose the land. In other cases, the direct punishment. Now look at the second text. The second text is right in the middle of the page. This is also from Deuteronomy 8, 11 to 14. There it says, take heed, again, hishamru lachem, lest you forget Adonai your God and fail to keep his commandments, his rules, and his statutes that I enjoin upon you this day. When you have eaten your fill, again, the same expression, and have built fine houses to live in, and your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold have increased, and everything you own has prospered, beware lest your heart grow haughty, and you forget Adonai your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt. And if you really forget the Lord your God and follow other gods and serve them and bow down to them, I put you on notice this day that you shall surely perish. And then we have a third time in the same book. And the third says, when I bring them into the land flowing with milk and honey, that I promise on oath to their fathers, and they eat their fill and grow fat, and turn to other gods and serve them, spurning me and breaking my covenant. Third time. So in short, it says, Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat. When Jeshua and waxed fat rebelled, he forsook the God who made him. And Nehemiah, at the very end of the Tanakh, follows in the tracks of Deuteronomy in recalling, I'm now quoting Nehemiah chapter 9, they were filled, they grew fat, and they luxuriated in your great bounty. Then defying you, they rebelled, they cast your teaching behind their back. In both cases, Israel fattened itself into apostasy. This problem is mentioned in Isaiah, Hosea, and Yechezkel. They all complain about the same thing, and they're both reflecting a theological reality of ancient Israel, that affluence is a source of religious defection. In fact, Hosea and Yechezkel go out of the way to say, I gave you gold and silver, you took the gold and silver, and what did you do? You made idols of it. So not only did you defect from me, but the things I gave you, you use to defect from me. So now God has a major problem. How do I maintain the loyalty of Israel to the one God and supply them with prosperity? Can the problem be overcome? So in order to answer that question, we're going to compare the second paragraph with the first paragraph. So now turn to the third page. Okay, now the third page is multicolored. I'm going to tie the 2 paragraphs together, and we're going to focus upon the commonality and the differences. So in the first paragraph, You see the two paragraphs in Hebrew. The common material is color coordinate to show that section 2 did to section 1. In other words, we're assuming that section 2, Vayayim Shemoah, knows section 1 because of the commonality. It's the difference between section 2 and section 1 which underscores the distinct message of the second parashah. Okay? So, let's look at line 1. It starts off, where do we find this line? So look at that color. Go down to 1a. Okay? If you go down to 1a, we have li'avat Hashem Elokechem. So that's the emphasis upon loving the Lord your God. And it says, b'chol lavavchem, b'chol nafshechem. We have the word leiv and we have nefesh. That is that in common. What is distinct? B'chol modecha. There is no emphasis upon here ma'od, only on leiv and nefesh. So once we establish commonality, we focus our attention on the difference. And in focusing our attention on the difference, we see what is the focus of the first parashah as opposed to the focus on the second parashah. Okay, now let's go again. Even line 1, Yud Gimel says, Vaya Asher Anochi Mitzavcha Hayom, we're on line 2, should be what? Al Levavecha. Now the same words are found in Yud Gimel, the first line of the second parashah, of the second part. Asher Anochi Mitzaveh Etchem Hayom. See the yellow part? That corresponds to Asher, the second part of line 2 of the first parashah. Asher Anochi Mitzavcha Hayom. But there is no what? Al Levavcha. It gets changed in 1a. So by establishing commonality, I then focus upon difference and see what the differences are. So I notice that the first 2 lines of the second parashah are parallel to the first one, except for the word ma'od. Then if you go below 1a of the second parashah, we have 4 lines which have no comparable element in the first parsha. That shows you that this is the problematic of the second parasha and deals with a problem that the first parasha does not deal with. Although almost all the other lines have something in common, majority of the line in common, but a little bit of difference. What do lines 14, 15, 16, and 17, Yud Daled, Tet Vav, Tet Zayin, Yud Zayin? They are the distinctive part of the second parasha, all deal with the same problem. The problem is providing rain in its season to you, your animals. What will you do? You'll eat till you're filled. Achalta v'savata. Then Tet Zayin says, Hishamru lachem, be careful. Pen yiftel levavchem, meaning your heart will lead you astray. Now focus on the word levavchem, because the word lev, levavchem, also appears in 1a. So that's a key word. What will happen? Vesartem. Because of this, you will what? You will defect. And when you defect, what do? You worship other gods. Why will you worship other gods? Because you'll give them the credit for bringing the rain. How do you worship other gods? You'll bow down to them. Now, it's the worship of the other gods which evokes divine anger. Yud Zayin. So what we do? Therefore, the removal of the rain should solve the problem. And therefore, the ground will not give what? Yivula, its produce. Now, what will be the result? Says Yud Zayin, God gave you a good land. It has no rain. So you what? You will lose the land, probably because you will emigrate and you will not retain the land. I want you to retain the land because the very last line says, I'm trying to guarantee that your children will inherit the land. So how do I solve this problem? So now I'm going to look at 2a, which is verses 18 and 19 of the second paragraph. They are now the solution to the problem. By underscoring the difference, I focus on the problem. What's my problem? How do I provide rain and prosperity without you attributing it to the gods of rain of Canaan and therefore defecting from me? So now comes the solution. So now I'm looking at the common material between the first parashah and the second parashah as a solution to the problem of the second parashah. So what am I going to do? In other words, I'm going to maintain your loyalty by getting you to take what I'm saying to heart. My solution is, my problem is, how can I provide prosperity and affluence without it causing or inducing you to worship other gods? So I'm going to take three things that you really care about. The first is yourselves. So take my words and put them on lavavchem v'al nafshechem. This is now an explanation of the word tefillin. We don't need the word ma'od because the word ma'od has no application to tefillin. So you're going to put al lavavchem al nafshechem. Now, how do you do this? I say, take my words to heart. What does that mean? Comes along an explanation of the tefillin. Its location is significant to its meaning. How do you do v'samtem et devara eila al lavavchem v'al nafshechem? 4a now says ukshartam otam liot ayedchem vayilot atafot bein einechem. So if it is true that leiv and nefesh constitutes the whole person, right? There is no bachol, right? Constitutes the whole person. Then you take it to the heart by tying it to your arm and putting it on your head or between your eyes. So the tefillin now becomes the means for implementing. Therefore, it plays a different role than it played before. It also explains why tefillin has to come first, because it has to come immediately after the verse v'samtem. So I say v'samtem et devara eila al vavchem v'al nafshechem. Ha ketzad. How do you pull this off? And now the next verse says, "Ukshartem otam liot al yedchem v'yilot atafot bein einechem." Now look at the next line. The next line is 3a, verse Yud Tet. Now, this verse sounds like the other blue color, the first paragraph, right? Number 3, pasuk Zayin, on the first paragraph. V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam. So you have to notice the commonality and the difference. The message is in the difference. Now we said v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam. We emphasize that this is a difficult word, v'shinantam levanecha. How do we know it's difficult? If you look at the different Marshim, there is no consensus on what the word means. That means it's a difficult word. The function of a difficult word in literature is to slow down your reading. The technical term for this is called defamiliarization. By using a difficult word, I slow down your reading. You also focus vanecha, the lamed, and as opposed to the et. So now I look at the second parashah, and I see instead of the vishinantam, they have an obviously simple word, and its meaning is obvious. The limaritem, otam et benechem. So I have a simple word, limaritem, instead of vishinantam, and instead of saying le vanecha, I have et. So clearly this is different than the opening line. So we explained that the opening, how is it done? It is done with the barta bam, b'shiftecha b'veitecha, uv'leftecha v'derech, being that you are constantly engaged in divrei Torah, they identify with their parents and what they're doing. That is not true of the second paragraph. The second sever is v'limadtam et b'nechem lidaber. Now, what is lidaber bam? So probably the best perush is given by the Ramban, followed by the Chasim Sofer. He says lidaber bam kedei sheyidabru bam. In other words, I'm teaching my children in order that they should speak about them. I'm not talking about what I am going to do. I'm talking about what they are going to do. So if I'm effective,
Hello. Thank you everyone for your patience as we ride the waves of the internet together, as we do. And as we work on these and getting Rabbi Kimelman back up and running, if you would like to share in the chat, even just from what we've learned so far, the question Rabbi Kimelman asked us last week, which was, what is surprising you? What is the most surprising thing that we've talked about today? An aha moment, a question, a way of looking at this differently than you had before. Davey, that's great. The entire thing, but we can encourage us to go a little deeper. Here, I'll stop the share for now so that we can see everyone. Hopefully, because I'm like, there's a cliffhanger, right? Now I must know about the last lines. But even so, there's already been so much learning that has taken place today. What is surprising you? Yes. Here, I will also, I like that, Mitchell. The idea of it being an equal relationship, not a top-down reward and punishment, but a contract more of equals. That's beautiful. Thank you, Mitchell. It's your birthday. Happy birthday, Leah. Oh, goodness. Here, I'll make it so that people can unmute. If you'd like to unmute and wish Leah a happy birthday. Happy birthday. In the chat.
Thank you.
Yom Haledet Sameach. Yom Haledet Sameach. Haledet Sameach. Yom Haledet Sameach. Yes, the rain motif. It's all about the rain. And also thinking, I guess for myself also, how affluence is tied up with all of this. When does, right, and the image of silver and gold being made into idols, not that they're being made into a different idol, but that they themselves become the idols. There's a quote I use all the time that I can never attribute. I read it in this great book by Casper ter Kuile, called The Power of Ritual. And I need to check because he's quoting someone saying, human beings are wired for worship. We're going to worship something, right? Is it going to be status? Is it going to be money? Is it going to be beauty standards? These things that our kind of modern world expects us and encourages us actively to worship? Or is it going to be Yod He Vav He, the oneness, the source, the force, that which is greater than us, that we are all a part of? It's very powerful. Nevi'im. Right. That was also very interesting for
Listening to a good lecture, but he lost the connection.
to rattle off all the different times that it has happened, which means Moses' worries came true. And it happens, and yet still here we are, wrestling with and grappling. I'll be honest, friends, I have the handout, but I wouldn't be able to continue this lecture. We could potentially continue it together, but I would also encourage everyone. We were going to do it at the end, but here we'll do this. Yes, Evelyn, we can have a beautiful prayer for connection in here. I'm going to, since you're so good at this, I've now made you a co-host so that you can unmute and give us a spontaneous prayer for connection.
Hi, everybody. So it happened in the podcast that we lost connection with Eliana, internet connection, not like bondage. So we prayed, we say, let's put our words where our mouth is and let's walk the walk. So I invite everybody to join in the chat with this spontaneous prayer. The way I would like to start is creator of the world, power of connection between human beings and all that exists and you. If this is a good moment to continue this class in the traditional way that was planned, and if that's the plan, please reestablish the internet connection. And if not, let us find in this space another gem and connect to each other in a different way. We also pray for our rabbi who is teaching us our More.
We are going to do this in a different way, something I have never done before, which is, okay, Rabbi, we're going to try this. Say something, please.
Okay, if you can hear me, this way I can be heard and not seen, which is really a divine quality.
Yes, indeed. All right.
Okay, hopefully it will not go to your head.
Never. All right, we're back up with you and the handout.
Okay, let's do it this way. Fine. So in the midst of the discussion of the paragraph, we're on verse Yutet, which is defined as 3a, and it says, in this case, it is changing. There it was, you will repeat them, or you'll encode them by repeating to your children. Here it says differently. You will teach your children. In other words, the goal is to get your children to do what you're doing. And how will they do it? Which is a straight citation of the first parashah. And it's a little bit, doesn't really fit here, because it should have said, B'shiftam b'veitam, u'berechtam b'derech, u'v'shachbam u'v'kumam. We're talking about them. The function of the citation is to relate to the first parashah and say, you're going to do to your children as before you yourself did, and you will exemplify them. Then we end the paragraph, the identical. So the concluding line, they keep. The first two lines, they reverse the order. The reason they reverse the order is Tefillin answers a different question here. It says, "Usamtem et dvara'ela al levavchem v'al nafshechem." Then the question is, how do you pull that off? And you pull it off by having them bound on your arm and between your eyes. So 4a now becomes the implementation of 2a, and therefore it gets closer to it. Putting Talmud Torah, instead of being number 1 as in the first parashah, becomes number 2. Now the result of this is I can maintain your loyalty by tying 3 things to God. Number 1 is your body, as reflected in the Tefillin. Number 2 is your children. Number 3 is your home. Now, if you ask the person, what are the three things people care most about? And the answer would be their body, their self, their children, and their quintessential possession, which is their home. So God says, if I combine these three things to me, follow closely, yourself, your progeny, and your home, then I can take the risk of providing rain in its season and prosperity and allow you to luxuriate, and you will not what? Be led astray and follow after other gods. So the original problematic of providing prosperity leading to defection will now be overcome because I'm going to bind these three things that people most care about to the worship of God, allowing you to resist the temptation of the defection which follows from affluence, especially in the land of Israel, which is dependent upon rain, and drought will cause you losing the land. So now to summarize this, look at the bottom of this page, where we have compared the two of Deuteronomy 6, the first parashah of Shema, with the second parashah. So line 6 says, and these words which I command and charge you this day shall be on your lathes. And line 18a of the second parashah says, you shall place these words of mine upon your lathe and nephesh. And how do you do that? Says line second parashah, and teach them to your children, right? To talk about them, teach you to talk about them when you are at home, when you are away, when you lie down, and when you get up. So what will happen? Your children will now do what you're doing. And then finally, 18b, and bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. So what you've seen is how Deuteronomy 11 rearranges the material of Deuteronomy 1, keeping the themes, but changing the order. Now, what is the result of this? Because the goal of the second parashah is different than the goal of the first one. The first goal's parashah is a reflection of how one expresses love for God. And by going through the motions, you frequently get the corresponding emotion. That is not the problem of the second parashah. The problem of the second parashah is, how does God provide affluence without it leading to religious defection? Because he wants the people of Israel to remain on the land. That's why the last line of the parashah is reads like this: Laman yirbu yimechem, that's you. V'imei v'nechem, and your children. How did your children get in here? Simply because verse 19 says, V'limartam atam v'nechem, and if your children do as you are now doing, and they study Torah in every position, in every place, then they will retain and maintain your ways. And therefore, they will stay in the land. And they will not be afflicted by defection to other gods. So it says, Laman yirbu yimechem, v'imei v'nechem, al adama. How do I keep you on the land? Asher nishba. Now here, adama, which normally refers to earth, specifically refers to Aretz. Normally you would say Eretz, meaning what? Eretz Yisrael. Here he cannot use the word Eretz. He has to use the word Adama. And it's a rare using of the word Adama to refer to Eretz Yisrael because of the end of the line. It says, Asher nishba Hashem lavotechem lateit lahem. God promised to your fathers, lateit, not to you, but to give to them. And how long we give it to them? Kimei hashamayim ala aretz, as long as the heaven endures over the earth. Now, the last word is aretz. Since the biblical expression is shemayim va'aretz, that is the merism from heaven to earth, I already used the word aretz. So I can't use it again for Eretz Yisrael without causing confusion. So therefore, line 21 replaces the normal use of Eretz by the word Adama, and the Adama means here the land of Israel. So the last line, it says, Laman yirbu yimechem, that may your days multiply, and the days of your children on Adama, the land, meaning the land of Israel, because God took an oath to your fathers to give to them. Who's them? Not you. Meaning here, to your children. And may it last as long as heaven is on earth, because as long as I bound to you the three things you most care about, which is self, v'lavchem v'nafshechem, children, v'limartam et b'nechem, and home, uchtaftam amazot beitecha v'isharecha. I can take the risk of providing prosperity and affluence without it leading to religious defection. And that is the problematic of the second parashah. To reduce it to the terms of schar v'onish is not only an oversimplification, it's a consistently misleading. Because here, it is not really an onish, meaning I'm going to directly punish you. I'm withholding the rain, because the rain is that which tempts you to worship other gods. What is my goal? To guarantee the longevity of the people of Israel on the land of Israel. And that is the problematic of the second parashah, and it's revamping of the first parashah to its new goals. It is no longer adequate to talk about, to promote the love of God. The love of God in compliance with the commandments is here to lead to longevity on the land, which means you start with yourself, you continue with your children, and hopefully the last song is Kimei Hashemayim al Haaretz.
Whew. Wow. Thank you so much, Rabbi. When you were off for a second there, we were having a little discussion about what surprised us, and I think this reading has surprised and many of us, and given many of us a different way to think about this paragraph. So thank you very much.
Okay, we have some time for questions.
Yes, we had.
Is there a way of doing it?
We had one question in the chat, and then friends, if you have other questions, please put them in the chat or raise your Zoom hand and we'll call on you. Mitchell asks, if the second paragraph of the Shema, the Vahaya, is not seen as a contract, do you still accept the traditional understanding of this paragraph representing Kabbalat ol mitzvot, accepting the yoke of the commandments?
No, I think I understand that phraseology. We have Kabbalat ol Malchut Shemayim, Kabbalat ol HaMitzvot, but it's not really Kabbalat ol HaMitzvot, all the mitzvot. That is true. It's a true statement.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's adequate to the complexity of the paragraph. The paragraph is specifically focusing on the three mitzvot of the first Shema and using them to solve the problem. When you say Kabbalat ol HaMitzvot, you don't focus upon the problematic. So I would say the statement is correct, but it's insufficiently precise to track the meaning of the second paragraph.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Kabbalat ol mitzvot, taking on the yoke of all the mitzvot, when in fact it's much more specific and particular.
Right, but it doesn't explain why these specific ones and why they revamped the first paragraph, and therefore to spell out the problematic of the second paragraph. So the question is not that I disagree with it.
Mm-hmm.
I just think there is a more precise rendering which illuminates the function of the second parashah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I know we're pushing our time. We appreciate everybody's patience. It does not seem that there are so many questions. Rabbi Kimelman, can you give us a little coming attractions for the third class in this series next week? What will you be discussing?
Okay, so the third parashah, the question is, how is it related to the first two parashiyot? The first and second have a lot in common. They both come from Sefer Devarim, and they follow the order of Sefer Devarim. Then we have the third parashah, which is considered Vayomer, which means it's out of the biblical order. So the question is, while the first two go together, as part of the intention of Devarim to put them together, why is Vayomer the third one? How is it connected? So what I'm going to show you is not only that it's connected by its verbs, but the original prayer in the Mikdash, there were four parashiyot. And the first one was the Aseret Dibrot. So I'm going to ask you to do a simple thing. Look at the opening line of Aseret Dibrot, found in Shemot and Devarim. Then look at the last line of Vayomer. Look for the similarities and the differences, and you'll be able to figure out the focus we're going to have for the third session.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that coming attraction and for being so flexible. Wi-Fi does what it wants. Often I've been in that situation many times. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Anyhow, it shows you when you rely on something which is wrong, it leads to defection.
It's very true. It's exactly what we talked about today. And friends, just a couple of quick things. If you signed up through the Zoom, thank you. We will be sending you this recording, the handout, if you would like to pore over it. Krisha Asmi has put in the chat also the Light Lab website for you to take a look at. We're doing a companion class tomorrow evening where we will be looking more closely at the Ve'ahavta paragraph for personal meaning, singing through melodies, and having it be a place to explore what all this means to us. And we ran out of time to do it together, but I would recommend that you take a couple of minutes when we're done here and write down a takeaway that you had from this session, something that you want to remember, a question that you have, or as Rabbi Kimelman gave us last time, something that was surprising. And again, we'll send all of this to you later, and we're so grateful that you came to join us, and we will see you again next week, if not sooner. So thank you so much, Rabbi, and thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful afternoon. Shalom, shalom.